Hello, can everyone hear me? I am now live for the first time ever on YouTube called Wisdom Exchange, where we are going to explore and nerd out on psychology, philosophy, and personal development and just test out this YouTube live stuff. It's my first time doing it, so I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know if my video is working, if my microphone is working. Nobody's watching me, so that's good. Um, so yeah, I thought it'd be nice just to have some time, because normally I edit videos and I don't know, I'm a bit removed from the sometimes process of getting content up very quickly, and this is a bit more time to explore at my own pace with anybody who wants to explore and develop too. Can't really hear myself. And I thought to do it nice and early in the morning because I'm fresh, I got energy, um, even though I'm a little bit tired. Went out for a run, so it was good, and also just a bit informal way to talk to myself, since nobody's watching. But yeah, hopefully it'll be good, and also not too much pressure myself to actually have good content, but just explore and learn along the way, learn with other people. I can't seem to share my audio music, so I'm listening to music myself as well. And what else? Well, yeah, just to practice live streaming because it's a bit nerve wracking. Because normally when I'm recording a video, I can just cut out any ums and ahs and make sure I'm making actually sense rather than just talking a lot of rubbish. And also, hopefully, this would be funny as well because I can actually use my personality or use or express my personality and also get a bit more confident on camera because um, I think it takes some confidence to go live. Yeah, but hopefully everyone can hear me. I've got a microphone here. Uh, I guess I'll find out since this is a test stream. I'll find out when it goes on the channel. So let's see. So today we're going to share a screen and we're going to go through some basic stuff, some things I'm interested in, why I'm doing my things, just to make things clear to me and people who are interested in following this channel. Hopefully we can do something a bit regular like this wisdom exchange where we have like a forum that we can actually use, where we are exchanging wisdom. There's going to be a chat as well where people can jump in and explore. Oh, look, there's one person actually watching. Yay, hello. Maybe that's my mum. Who knows? Um, but yeah, hello, one person that's watching. Let's see if we can see if they're on a chat. No. Okay. Oh, they've left. Well, that was fun. Thank you. I probably scared them off. There you go. Okay, so without further ado, that's a 4-minute preamble. We are going to share my screen. Yes, share. Can everyone see it? I feel like I'm doing a Zoom meeting. How do we do it? All right, nice. So I thought it'd be fun. Right, let me first get the maps up. No, that's fine. Let's do this. I thought it'd be fun first to, since I'm interested in evolution and how humans work and everything, just to start from the start and just sort of explore humans, sort of how we work, where we came from, and just kind of explore that with everyone too. So, funnily enough, Homo sapien means wise human from Latin. And so I'm sort of kind of interested in the family background we came from and sort of how we developed. So we have a large brain, we have cognitive skills, and then actually how that, because compared to the other animals, they never actually developed complex societies and civilizations. Um, so if we look at here, I don't know if that's a direct ancestral lineage, but we sometimes forget when we're in civilization that, we're not the only kind of ones on the planet sometimes, and actually where we came from, quite primitive species. And it's also quite helpful when we're in a day-to-day work to know our basic primal instincts. And because often when we're dressed in a certain way or we're in a certain environment, we forget the actual core biology, neurology, psychology understanding of who we are. And then and so going back to that, we can kind of reflect on why we're not fulfilled or why we're sort of stuck in certain patterns in life. So that's why also I'm very interested in going back. And also it's just really cool vibes to see where we started from. Um, so yeah, so where did we start from in terms of geography? Because I feel geography does impact where we, or the land impacts how we work in the world. So whether it be like Indian culture, Chinese culture, Native Americans, we all draw from the land and we base our culture and societies on the land, and the food as well, and of course the circadian rhythms and such as well. So I think Homo sapiens evolved in Tanzania. Tanzania. Um, so let's actually go to the place of the cradle of humankind. So it's called Olduvai Gorge. Just want to explore what that area looks like. So we're going to go on Google Maps. Oh, there we go. Okay. I'm going to put the terrain like this so we can see. Okay, where are we? All right. So we are basically South Equatorial, sort of in line with Ecuador, kind of Brazil area, and sort of Singapore, Indonesia, New Guinea. So we're sort of in that region of the world in Tanzania. So that's the sort of environment we evolved in, this gorge. So, from my understanding of it, evolution works in that we the land shapes us and also the ecosystem. So I understand that there were certain mountainous regions and they blocked off certain weather patterns from forming, and so the trees become more spaced out. And so back then you had a sort of archaic or primitive form of a hominin species, and so from tree to tree, they actually found it very difficult to start to swing between the trees. And so the ones that were actually bipedal and could actually manage to go from one tree to another survived. But the ones who were very slow in doing so, because the predators, you're in the savannah, the predators would basically eat you. And also it became very advantageous to have that cognitive function in the brain, to start using tools to as an extension of yourself, and also having a social species, a group, so they could alert each other to any danger or work together in sort of teams for hunting, etc. So all of these together, bigger brain size, bipedalism, sort of changing the diet to have more meat in the diet, so it was more beneficial energetically. So, of course, when you're consuming meat, you're having a higher density of calories, whereas the pure vegetarian diet, so it took a long time to digest and wasn't so uh, yeah, energy dense. I think they didn't have cooking at that time. So anyway, in this gorge, super interesting. This is where we evolved as a hominin species. So whenever you're feeling stuck, just go back to your roots. Ah, here. So let's see if we can drop this guy. No. Can we drop him here? No. Okay. But anyway, this is the area we're sort of looking at. So we can see mountainous regions, kind of foresty area. Oh yeah. And kind of get a sense of the region. You have wide open plains here, as you can imagine, early hominin species hunting, surviving, getting berries, getting nuts. Um, quite open plains, maybe having a high vantage here. Um, plenty of wildebeest to hunt, zebras, looking out for our natural predators. Um, yeah, pretty interesting stuff. So that it's probably some skulls of some early hominin species as well. Of course, giraffe. So very lush. So we basically evolved in a very lush environment. So that's why we really had to evolve very, very, very good communication skills. Also, very good intuitive skills. We had to intuit whether something felt bad, something felt off, how the different tribal members were feeling. Of course, if somebody in the tribe was feeling a certain way, wanted to leave the tribe, had active aggression, all that threatened our survival, threatened the group survival. So super important to keep in mind when we're in the savannah. And that intuition and that deep primal instinct is maybe something that plays out in day-to-day life nowadays, but we don't really see that because we're in an office environment, or the things in where we get distracted, or we're on computers and phones is a totally different environment to when we're in the savannah and we were having almost 24/7 contact with the natural world, compared to nowadays where maybe we go out for a walk and run and our circadian rhythm and cycle aren't as deep contact. So yeah, this is super, super interesting to see. And you can just imagine what it was like, and how the mind state was like as well, being in the savannah with your guys. I don't know if they were like stressed all the time. Probably not. Probably only when the animals were attacking. But I imagine most of the time was a bit chill, going at a medium pace, mostly collecting foods, collecting resources to build. And I believe as well they started making basic pottery. They started making basic weapons, even some jewelry and arts and crafts to express themselves. And that's where it becomes really interesting compared to other species, because you sort of have this greater level of intelligence, or creative intelligence, um, as opposed to the intellectual intelligence or natural intelligence. This abstract intelligence that want to sort of um, express ourselves musically or culturally. And then that's something you'll see later in the more advanced civilizations that they sort of drawn on, like the Greeks, the Romans, sort of the personification of these arts and why they're so important and what happens when they're actually suppressed in the society. Um, so yeah, that was a basic look into our early human species, and of course there are humans still living there now in the environment. It's worthwhile to see how they conduct their society, how they eat, how their culture are, how they keep happy, how they keep fit. So probably a lot to learn from them, and just going back to their roots. Yeah. So then next, really delving into what was our brain space at that time, because actually, although our society and technology has evolved now, definitely, our brain space was basically the same. Our psychology was the same. Um, So it's worth actually, if you want to progress in life, if you want to get unstuck, or want to be the highest version of yourself, then it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile knowing this kind of story and the sort of Tanzania, how we were, just to get that vibe, get that feeling. But then also nowadays we have the psychological tools to sort of really delve into, okay, what are the processes going on? What, because it was good to have variation in the human species, what sort of energy was flowing into the brain processes at sometime that was necessary for survival, and sort of what along the spectrum of different personality traits, because everybody embodies the whole spectrum. But what sort of spectrum am I leading towards? Where are the energies directed in my brain naturally that I have the natural skills and abilities for? So in a hunter-gatherer society, these sort of traits were very useful, because maybe some people were better in a sort of external sensing environment. They were very quick to be tracking animals, very quick to pick up on the scents, flavors, the sights. Some people were more internally sensory focused. So, like whether these berries were, poisonous or not, or how a certain medicinal plant felt, or then how the feeling of the tribe felt. Where there was a harmonious, where was the next treachery going to come from, or who's not feeling so good, or being also very intellectualized, um, or practical, hands-on, in terms of making the tool the best tool it could be, um, trying to make your shelter very watertight. So all of these different brain processes and picking up on things are very important. So nowadays it's very important to realize, what brain processes am I using, what gift sets am I naturally leaning towards, and then how to leverage that. And then also knowing our weak or challenge points, and then how to overcome that, and then leverage our strengths even further. So, just to give you a bit of background, we're going to use some different things. So, Myers Briggs isn't very scientifically validated, but again, it just gives us a map and a tool of reality. Because in reality, like this sort of hunter gatherer aspect, the human brain. So, if you're familiar with Ian McGilchrist's work, is super interesting. The human brain is, you can't really just divide the functions into left and right, but he does make a point about left and right hemispheres. One is more analytical in its approach, and one is more holistic and creative in its approach. Just very broad strokes here. And so, based on these personality types and things, you're going to see this play out. And so the human brain provides a map of the world, so that we see on the screen there. It's basically a map. So we are not seeing exactly the world as we see it. All animals are seeing it a different way. All the human beings are seeing it in a different way. I'm seeing it a different way to you. But our brain has performed a map to see the world. And then it's very useful to see what filters we're seeing the map through. So one of the natural filters is the way we're seeing the world and the way our brain is obviously seeing it through. One is the way our society, our culture, our family setting is seeing it through. So it's worthwhile to unpick the layers and understand each layer. I'm not saying it very eloquently, but I'm practicing. But hopefully you're learning something along the way too. And so where was I going with that? So the brain has, yeah, so the reality, right? So basically, if you have the savannah there, and our brain is here, and it's basically producing a map and an abstract image of the savannah, or the social functions that are happening, whatever. But sometimes in life, I guess, nowadays is where we are not aware that we're functioning in a map state, and we think that is the real world. Um, and so what happens is we get so engrossed in the map that we effectively get stuck in a certain area. And sometimes people hit rock bottom, or they hit a certain stuck place that they basically snap up and they see, oh, like, what am I doing? They're basically regret whatever they did, whether it be a certain action or repetitive behavior, and then they repeat it again. They get sucked in because they're stuck in a certain mental process or mental loop. And so it's very important to understand the map of the world that we're using. And to understand the map of the world, we need to use certain maps or models of psychology to do so intellectually, which is very helpful. Equally, we can do things like meditation. That's why meditation is important. And from different cultures, we can see different meditative aspects. So things like closing your eyes, developing your attention to different parts of your body. So maybe you weren't aware of your hearing right now, and then maybe your eyes, your color, and then the feeling that you're feeling. So the only fundamental block, I think, is your attention as a human being. So when you can train your attention, you can then see the different parts of the map you're using, and then be able to see reality more clearer. And so there's a famous story in Indian mythology or philosophy where there's basically different parts of an elephant, and people are blindfolded, and they're trying to say, hey, this is, definitely, they're holding the trunk and they're saying, I've got, something here, water hose. And someone's holding, hey, I've got you know, a tusk of something. I've got a, strong root of a tree, but it's carrying a leg. But in reality, everyone's blindfolded and they're feeling the map that they're, you know, sensing. But when they take the blindfolds off, the whole reality comes together, and that's actually an elephant. So just it's a metaphorical way of saying we can only perceive a certain amount of things. But when we go inside ourselves and try to perceive or try to put our attention to everything we're perceiving, we can see a greater picture of reality. And that's why dialogue is important, because speaking to another person and seeing their view of reality and your view of reality, the sum is greater than the whole. You're able to journey to an abstract place, see their point of view, they're able to see your point of view, and you're also able to enter in dialogue, create a space where you're able to see a different view of reality and come up with a different view of reality, and then leave. And then you're becoming, when you're leaving, you're leaving the conversation or the dialogue with a greater understanding of the world and yourself, hopefully. And that's what the Greeks understood, that dialogue was a flow of meaning. Um, yeah, and then so going back to this map sort of thing, to understand our own map, our own mental processes, and our own mental understanding is really important as well. So if you're interested in understanding yourself, if you're interested in understanding your own mental understanding, then stay tuned. Not for long, because it's on the next tab. So if you're not familiar with MBTI, you can watch my YouTube video on Know Thyself that I recorded with my sister. So you can see that on the channel. That covers some of this. But anyway, I'm going to do a light overview. You basically have different functions. It can be understood from a very rudimentary or simple point of view with these 4 letters, but actually goes much deeper. And that everybody embodies a functional stack. There's 8 of them, and these letters signify your top 4 stacks. So there's another 8 stack, but primarily a personality type focuses on prioritizing 4 mental processes. And if you want to understand it in depth, you have to understand how the mental process works, and then also how they interact with each other and how they play each other and their strengths and weaknesses. So I might give some clarity or some understanding if I explain, from my point of view, my mental processes, and also it's also clearer why I'm also doing this sort of stuff, and why I'm interested in philosophy, psychology, culture, and also why I'm wanting to share it with people as well in this sort of format, in a talking format. Um, so FE, if you see from a lot of my YouTube videos, I always have the world rotating, or I'm always exploring different cultures. That's because it's my primary function. It's primarily how I view the world. Now, of course, everyone's on a spectrum, so I also embody all other characteristics that all human beings embody. But extroverted feeling is basically the running process of the human brain. So it's the when I'm on autopilot, it's how I'm showing up to the world and how I'm perceiving and seeing the world. And so each personality type has four cognitive function. With the extroverted feeling type is about basically how is what they use to communicate with the world and how the world communicates by them. So I believe it goes into a bit more depth here. Um, Basically, it reads the vibes of a room, but I think that's a bit more specific. Um, let's see. This is a bit like more colloquial, I guess. Yeah, so maybe this is a good one to compare it to introverted feeling. So it's extroverted function, meaning that it focuses on an extroverted feeling point of view. So it's how does a group feel about a certain thing, and it's a medical mirror that points outwards. And so it's really understanding how does understanding first how does cultures perceive things, how does the human society perceive things, and sort of what do they need, and how do they function, as opposed to introverted feeling, which I think INFPs have, which is how do I feel about things, how do my um, feelings, how do different emotions and feelings sort of work. And so there's a really depth there in terms of introverted feelings. But extroverted feeling works about the feelings of others. How do other um, feel about things? And it's not just in a more light point of view, it can get really subtle and really specific. So, how can one person influence the vibes of a room of another for another person, or how does one culture influence another, or what is it in a culture or a society that is influencing it to work in a certain way? So that's my interest, and that's why I'm always looking into societies and culture in the world, because I'm interested in how does societies function, how does that impact the human citizens, and also how can we make it better. But it's just really feeling um, the harmony, and how can we harmonize the external world, and what's not bringing harmony there. And so it's a very sort of feeling function, and it's not as logical, but it comes from the heart is the best type to explain it. It's more subtle in that way, and it gets embodies more in females more than males typically, which in a society setting is much more um, it's much more rare, I would say, in a society setting, because extroverted feeling is more of a nurturing point of view. So if you have like a child, how's that child feeling? It's looking to nurture that child. So I think I heard somewhere like 50% of females have a extroverted feeling function, but males tend to not have that. They tend to have more things like extroverted thinking, which is creating structures in outside world and thinking about these structures, um, and things like that. So that's a very interesting one, and also a very interesting one for me to understand how I'm processing. the world. Then introverted intuition, which is quite a rare function actually. It comes up in INFJs, ENTJs, INTJs, and ENTJs. And it's really this introverted intuition. So it's not really a mental process that you can um, leverage in a sense, but you can make space for. So you can actually make space for it by um, sort of separating yourself from the world. And then this needs to take time to reflect and understand all the inputs of the world. And this really focuses on understanding um, the background information, taking it in, forming constellations of data, and merging it to become ideas or thoughts. And it kind of makes the internal world very, very abstract. So, like I was saying about the maps, it's sort of taking individual data points of the world and sort of you're able to derive patterns from the world. So INFJs and INTJs are very good at understanding, okay, there's a point here, there's a point here, there's a point here. How are the points connected? So for INFJs, it'd be like, okay, someone's feeling like this, someone's feeling like that, or they're acting in a certain way. How does all the points interact with each other, and how does that play out? And I can actually future predict in a certain way. How will that play out in a person? So that's why they're very good as therapists in understanding certain behaviors, body languages, and expressions of a person, and then understanding how that will play out in a certain way. Equally for INTJs, understanding maybe financial markets, the external world, in terms of the worldly matters, um, and then deriving data points for that, and then seeing how the business is going to traject in the future. So that's how introverted intuition works. And it's more intuitive in nature. And so you can imagine how that was really also important in the hunter gatherer tribe. Our brain functions back then, understanding the data points, then intuition, and then understanding how things might play out in the sort of family or society dynamic. So really cool there. Extroverted sensing, it's more so in terms of like this functional stack, you can see how they start playing with each other because SE supports FE by fueling the the extroverted and introverted intuition impression of the world, because instead of just understanding the feeling and then intuiting everything, it actually gives a concrete example. So it's a sensing externally. So you're sensing the whole world around you, picking up on the maybe the wind or the terrain, like if you're going to be tracking animals or anything external that's sensing. And from nowadays in the modern day, it's like understanding societies and cultures, deriving abstract points of view about them in a more abstract way, and then videography, capturing this in a videography format, and then processing that and showing it to people in a certain way that will interact. So you can see how I've sort of identified these and leveraged the strengths. And I've not done that fully yet because I need to work on my presentation to people, to connect more with people, to actually um, refine this aspect in terms of my abstract models and understanding psychologically and philosophically and culturally. And then, of course, my editing skills and videography techniques. But you can actually see how you're not just isolating them, you can actually make them play into each other and actually divorce yourself from being too engrossed in them and understanding how they are working within you in terms of mental processing, and then leveraging that. Um, so let's see, extroverted sensing. Yeah, so it's worth also saying that the third function might be less developed in children as adolescents. So depending where your function stack are, um, they will develop later in life. So maybe, when you have an extroverted child or introverted child, you can see that primary stack acting first in the world. Super interesting there. So yeah, you can go read into these things if you're interested in your own time, and you can start to see how these detail orientated or non-detail orientated aspects of yourself um, show up as well. And then the last thing is, and they all also help balance a stack in terms of evolutionary. So we will see that in terms of the introverted thinking. So introverted thinking, of course, can be Achilles heel before it's well developed, because if you're last in the working function stack, like I said, there's 8. If you're last in the 4, there's going to be least developed. But it's all about developing an internal framework of ideas that's very distilling things down to their essence in terms of a engineering or scientifically point of view, in terms of a internal framework. So it's analyzing complex theoretical problems in their head in terms of intricate math equations. Yeah, I mean, I'm very good at maths in terms of the abstract point of view, writing it down because I come from an engineering background. But in terms of solving it in my head, I find that very difficult. Um, but it's something that you can actually leverage, because analyzing complex theoretical problems, I can actually get a theoretical framework. It doesn't have to be maths, it could be in terms of like cultural or extroverted feeling or societal theoretical problems. So having all this functional stack and understanding your functional stack is very important in your own personal development in life. So um, I'd really encourage you to go and understand this cognitive function stack. So that was a bit about MBTI. Like I said, it's split into 4 types. People think that they're boxed into a type, but it's actually not true. Like I said, it's a spectrum. So find out what your type is, how you can leverage your type, what your weaknesses are, and that will really help you in terms of your career, any relationships you have. And then if you want to comment as well what your type is, you can do that, and I'll give you some podcast suggestions that are really, really interesting to understand um, what your different types are. There are some memes and stuff as well that you might find relatable to, but it goes deeper than the memes. So that's quite interesting. So next thing is enneagrams. So the cognitive functions that we've seen, like we were in Africa, in the primal landscape, how our brain processes information and then outputs that. That is basically the processing layer. But if we want to understand our deeper feelings and motives, what actually subconsciously drives our thinking processes, Enneagram might be a good tool to look at. This is a bit more robust and scientifically validated. But again, we're all human beings are on a spectrum, but we tend to lean on an area more than others. And so it can be worthwhile knowing. The way it works is we have a primary number that we operate on. So, for example, if you're operating on a 2, you're basically a giver, but it means that you'll have wings 1 and 3, and your wings, like a bird, will balance you out. So 1 will be like a perfectionist, but again, wings can have a burdened and an unburdened side. When you get too burdened, it might go into a more critical voice. So if you ever hear that inner critic in you pushing yourself too far, or it can go to a more healthier state. Just likewise, a competitive aspect of yourself. You can get too far on achieving, burnt out, worked out, society nowadays. um, or it can be a more healthy state where it's actually helping us to achieve our goals. And then it can help us balance out our main primary function that we feel is most aligned to ourselves. And then that's, you can see already how that's going a layer deeper than MBTI, because MBTI was more finding out our mental processes, what we are tending to act out in the world, how we're unfolding in the world like a flower. And then the Enneagram is okay, it's like that, but it's going to a deeper level. If you want to understand yourself in terms of personal development, you have to understand yourself on a conscious level, but you also have to understand yourself in a subconscious level. How are your um, emotions playing out on a subconscious level? How each of these emotive needs want to be met? Are they being met in an unhealthy way? Are they being met in a healthy way? And how can we keep that balanced in terms of relationships and careers? So I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but it's worth knowing. And again, these arrows are important because, like we said, there's wings 1 and 3, but these arrows are important in that when twos need to go to a place of refuge, they can go to a 4, and when they're going to a growth point, they go to a place of 8. So understanding this in practical terms, not abstract terms, if 2 is a helper, so they're overly giving a lot, that's their primary function, but they feel their needs are not being met, then a growth area, for example, if they were in a meeting, they will go to an 8, which is being a bit more logical and putting their needs into the position, but in a healthy way. Then they're getting their needs met, and then they can go back to giving. That's a very simple example, but you can go deep into it and understand how that works. So we started on the African savanna plains for the Homo sapiens evolving. We went into the functions, understanding how that works in terms of a human being, their brains turning up in the world, how you can leverage your functions, and then going deeper into the subconscious. Okay, the memes as well. Going deeper into the subconscious, understanding um, what part of the spectrum is most active in our psychologies. Um, then we're going to go a bit deeper into psychology. So if you know Carl Jung was a European psychologist. He was working with Sigmund Freud, but he sort of distanced himself from Sigmund Freud later in his life. But going a bit deeper now into um, the world and society, so our external world, how we're working or interacting with our family, our society, our jobs, our relationships, all the way into the world of a psyche. So, when you're alone, when you're walking in nature, etc., how is the brain operating by itself without interacting with the external world? So, I'm just going to touch on some aspects here. So we have the persona or the personality, which everybody sees that you're like this, you're like that, and a sort of a mask. And it's good to have that because it provides a sort of smooth integration and working in the world in society. Um, but of course, it's good to understand in order to leverage um, ourselves and have a more fulfilling life. Then we also have this ego aspect, you know, which is the MBTI, which is the Enneagram. Um, so this ego aspect is how we are constructed and sort of where in the spectrum that we are operating on. So it's not necessarily to say it's really bad. It's just that how we are kind of programmed to work naturally. But then we also have a shadow side to our ego. So like I said in a number 2, that someone was giving all the time, but the shadow side might be that they're not getting their needs met and they're sort of, when people don't see them, they're sort of acting in the shadow side, or they're a bit in a negative way. And so what's dangerous, as Carl Jung said, is when someone never looks at their shadow side and they're split off from their shadow side. And so maybe they're giving so much and suddenly they'll just burst out and say, why are my needs not being met? But this can can manifest itself in different ways depending on um, what function you're lying on or what MBTI you're lying on, and to integrate that shadow. That's why in a lot of cultures or philosophies they say that you should have a sword in terms of to fight, but to keep it sheathed, and that you are performing your function, but you're also integrated your shadow. So when something comes up or when something you know is going against your typical way of working, you know how to deal with it by dipping into your shadow side, and so you're comfortable going into your shadow, um, instead of cutting it off and repressing it. Then we have the personal unconscious, and this is the complexes. So when we are distracting ourselves or we are very critical to ourselves, and then we sort of, some people, are alcoholics or they're binge eating, or very subtle things like nowadays you'll have your phone and you sort of numb yourself to looking at your phone. This is going on the realms of personal unconscious, because you're not really sure why you're looking at your phone. You're sort of distracting yourself. um, so really dipping into, what's actually going on here. Why am I doing this? What is going on unconsciously? Why am I being overcritical? Why do I have the to need some dopamine to do these things and then regret it after? Because because the consciousness will then be like, okay, I regret that and I don't want to do it again. But then the unconsciousness will come back again and repeat the same cycle. And so it's all about bringing the personal unconscious into consciousness. And that is also called some shadow work. And then we can look into that, later. I'm not so trained or knowledgeable on that, but I know that this is a good aspect to look into. Then we also have so that was consciousness. Then we also have the collective unconsciousness. So when we're born into the world, I think it's the first 7 years, we are um, downloading a lot of cultural, societal, familial, um, collective unconsciousness as a child to operate in the world so we don't become feral. So we are basically socialized into the world. Um, and so we have a sort of cultural unconsciousness. So even when you're sometimes in a meeting, whether you're in a sort of Zoom meeting or you're sitting down in sort of an event or something, and you'll maybe feel there's a tension or something. This could also be a collective unconsciousness, or it could be like societal ways of doing things, or ways of not doing things. This is also collective unconsciousness, and so this also has an impact on the self. So even as you begin to work with each other, on yourself, you actually begin to uncover the collective unconsciousness that's working on you, because a person is not just an individual person, but they're a fragment of the human society that they're working in. So it could be like if you come from an Indian society, you're working with a personal unconsciousness that's also has a root in a collective unconsciousness. Um, and then also, if you're part of a religion or you're part of a football team or whatever, you're also going to be a fragment. Your belief system is going to be a fragment of a collective unconsciousness. So the way that people dress or their haircut, or the way they act, or like also the way you speak in the world. So English, our words are in English, our thoughts are in English, and so effectively the way we are expressing ourselves is locked in English if you don't know another language. And so that creates a axis of confined workings in a world. And so if your thoughts and expression are in English, then you're effectively going to only um, operate in the world from a certain axis. And that's why the Greeks said like music, poetry, and certain other artistic forms of expression is very important because it goes beyond just a language frame. And so you can begin to express yourself in deeper ways. And that's why language and art and music is actually very, very deep expression, just like mathematics, but in a different way, more in the technical aspects of the psychology and philosophy. Um, yeah. Then we sort of have the self, which is the bit we're operating from, right? So the bit that we're watching all of these MBTIs, watching all of the enneagrams play out that we looked at previously. It's that self, that sort of higher view that we can look at places from a non-judgmental point of view. Um, so, for example, imagine you're in a situation where someone's shouting at you, like the Buddha said, someone was shouting at them, and their father was like, "Why are you not reacting?" And the Buddha was like, that's on them. That's their gift. So this is kind of a self. That's just a story about like the self point of view. So you can effectively have a form of detachment, see other people's parts operating, also see yourself, your parts operating, and then leveraging the parts that are natural in your life and putting that into the world. And then the parts that are effectively unconscious or shadow, taking that up into the world. So this is not a purely intellectual exercise. This is actually like when you're feeling scared, feeling that emotion, or when you're feeling distracted or just not feeling good, sitting that with that emotion, bringing your attention to that emotion and understanding what's actually going on here. What are the what are the complexes that are going on here? So it's not just an intellectual exercise. It requires some energy. It requires some emotional understanding. So that's why I think on average, females are very good at being in touch with their emotions and expressing that in the world. Um, whereas men would typically be more on the physical world, society, in terms of the intellectualizing aspects. Again, it's a generalization and it's a bell curve, so you cannot put people into boxes. But it's a way of um, it's a way of understanding the world through a model. Again, you can see here family, religion, society, and your behaviors. That's why symbolism is very important as well, because symbolism is also a way of representing the cultural or personal unconscious. So symbolism basically points to, but it not is. So people sometimes get caught up on the actual symbols, but it points to a deeper emotional representation of what's going on in the world. And that's why in Hinduism, you have thousands of gods. In Greece, you have the Pantheon. In Rome, you have the Pantheon as well. So hopefully we'll see the vlogs coming up on the channel as well on that. So these pantheons or these gods basically represent complexes inside of us. So they're not really gods, flying about, but there are the just like Marvel, right? The representations of the complexes inside of us. So, like we seen, there was like different MBTIs or enneagrams. So you'll have like a god embodying wisdom, you'll have a god embodying trickery, like the old wise man, and they will have moral stories of these different parts of us playing together, and the stories will basically end up unfolding in such a way that it tells a moral story. So these parts of us are actually, so it actually gets quite complicated, and actually shows the emotional sensitivity and understanding of these, Indian philosophies or Greek mythologies or Egyptian even mythologies. So it actually brings into a more technical, or I would say understandable point of view what these guys were trying to convey in terms of psychology or emotional understanding. And why is that important? Because it not just relates to the emotional and psychic stability of the individual, but also of the whole society. So if a whole society understands of how the emotional parts operate and regulate, then we can relate to ourselves better and relate to others better effectively. And so societies that effectively portray their mythologies and understand their mythologies are um, are more stable. And I think that's why in Athens they had a high degree of stability, and democracy came about as well. In India as well, thousands of years ago, they had a degree of stability, and they were able to um, obtain a complexity that we'll see in Maslow's hierarchy as well. So this is kind of the science of the sociology, the way I understand it anyway. And so where was I going with this? Yeah, so this was the Carl Jung's archetypes. And so if we then go on to this generational trauma, so if you're familiar with Gabor Mate's work, there's a big T trauma, which is your typical traumas that you'll see, but there's also little t trauma. And when children are little, it can be more subtle things. So if they're wanting a need and the need is not met or neglected, then this is a little t trauma. So effectively, the child doesn't feel needed or wanted. But this is a sort of meme format, but it's sort of funny because it says the truth behind it. So this old guy says, "You're stupid." Maybe he has some people behind him saying something. This guy says, "You're not good enough." But um, this guy effectively recognizes the trauma happening, um, and then creates a sort of mental or psychic block, and then he's able to express a new story to his child. And that goes back to the Greek mythology and the Hindu mythology as well, because the human mind effectively runs on stories or narratives, which is why politicians use a lot of narratives and stories as well. And stories are very popular in religious teachings like parables, poetry, because effectively our script is based on stories. Um, and for the Greek mythology and the Greek narratives, the gods embodies certain parts of us and certain stories of us as well, which is why certain mythology I mean, if you want to embody a certain thing in life, like I know that Kali or Hades, I think it is, the gods of the underworld in Hinduism and in Greek respectively, sort of embody this aspect of destruction, but also like clearing it for new growth. So people often embody the narrative or the mythology, or they pray to this sort of aspect of the different parts of the human mind to also invoke that part psychologically. So they'll make some stories based on that. They'll make some music. They'll make some art, and so they'll surround themselves by this part, and that will basically invoke or trigger psychologically this sort of part. So that I think that's why humans used to pray to different sort of gods. Um, and so, sorry, that's just my messages popping up. So yeah, I think that's why the psychology or psychological understanding that provided humans with strength back then. So that is some intergenerational trauma. And for example, the immigrant generation that we explored on the YouTube channel as well through a story, but also understanding the psychological understanding, right? So the parents often didn't give a lot of time to their children in terms of because they were working all the time, almost 24/7, because they were immigrants to a different country, and they weren't able to give time to the children a certain way. And the immigrants that left their country, whether it be Hong Kong, whether it be Africa, whether it be the Caribbean or India or Southeast Asia, compared to their sibling, they had to have impetus to leave to US, Canada, UK, other countries to work. So they actually had a certain mindset to leave. So they were maybe overly competitive, they were very industrious, and they basically all concentrated in a certain region. And so they maybe passed this mindset down to their kids and their children as well. And so having that very specific mindset, it was good maybe for that situation, but when certain thought loops or things go get passed on, effectively it becomes defective. And so the new generations have to understand these thought processes, question them, and then shed them and create new narratives, or just become aware, and then build new narratives in the mind for situations that they want to go forward in life and build. So this is really the understanding and the psychological understanding behind the generational story, in this sort of immigrant aspect. But it can be applied to certain things. For example, if your family was in a war setting, there'll be some maybe trauma there, etc., etc. So I won't spend too much time on this. Last one I want to cover is Maslow's hierarchy. So super interesting stuff. Maslow himself, I believe he was an ENFJ. Um, so you can kind of see how the ENFJs see the world, or they look at the world. Um, so this will be super helpful in terms of um, understanding your basic needs, meeting them, and then moving up step by step. But again, it's a spectrum, so we should not get fixated like a box, but more intuitively understand and situationally understand how these apply in our lives. So, okay, water, air we don't get much of these days. We don't really go out. Water, when we're sitting at a desk all day, we're so involved in our work, we often forget to drink. Sleep, again, blue light from screens messing up our circadian rhythm. We're often, so I went out for a run this morning, going out, even if it's, you can see on my YouTube channel, I did shorts. Even going out in the cloudy weather, you're getting 500 to 800 lux. A sunny day, I think it's 1,000 or over 1,000 lux. Inside, you're not getting much lux. So that affects our circadian rhythm in the pineal gland of our brain, and the circadian rhythm in turn affects all of our physiological mood regulation, our digestive system, and all of our functions. Getting 8 hours, 8 hour plus sleep a day. So I won't go into the detail of why sleep is good for us, but memory retention, clearing out, pruning all of the memories, and then also figuring out all of our problems for the next day. It's just so important. Every organism does it on the planet. Shelter, of course, clothing, temperature control, so important for homeostasis, reproduction as well. All of these primary needs, and this is like all animals have this. So this basic stuff, surprisingly nowadays, because we're in an office environment, we're working or on certain schedules. Back in the hunter-gatherer times, we didn't have a schedule. We weren't really in an office environment. Our stress response was in um, was in a direction towards animals, saber-toothed tigers, lions in the savannah. Nowadays, we're getting a mild stress response. So email comes in, you're not moving much, and so movement, mild movement, basically sheds a lot of the stress. But because we're not moving a lot, we're getting mild stress accumulation. Then that's causing, atherosclerosis, heart disease, etc. And this is why deep understanding of nature and where we come from in terms of the human evolution is so important, to give a bird's eye view and not get too caught up on the focused mindset on our human created structures of work structures or society structures, because these are all created and they change. But we should understand the fundamentals of our human biology and functions in order to um, leverage. I keep saying leverage, but it's true. In order to leverage our own human body structure and function, and then input that into the systems of our life, or create systems of life that will be most beneficial to us. So it's a bit like an art in a way, the art of life. Safety needs. So stability, like maybe monetary stability, predictability, protection, freedom for fear, structure, order, law, limits. So that's good. Our like I said, this is the society structures before. They're actually good because they provide, and they've come a long way in the past few years, because they do provide freedom from fear, protection, law and order. We do have that, but at the same time, they shouldn't constrict the individual human. And with COVID, I think we've also seen the balance from um, the corporate point of view, in terms of working from home, from family, and providing structure and order, but not too structure and order. Limits, also not too much limitations. So it's also a balance between order and chaos, let's say. So physiological needs, safety needs, social needs. This is so important. So giving and receiving affection. There are certain love languages as well. So understanding this mental map of love languages, physical touch, affirmations, gift receiving. You can do a quiz on that online if you want to understand yourself deeper in that way as well. Intimacy, friendship, tenderness, affiliation, love, and belongingness. So having a deep level of trust and understanding in your personal development is the next level. Because again, going back to the Enneagram type, it will show a lot of shadow. Because if you're feeling maybe very resistant to a deep level of intimacy, or in a relationship, if you're very avoidant, that means you can work on your shadows there as well. And also, as human beings, that social connection is fundamental and is very important. And yeah, it's very important, because it provides that, you can't really see it, but it provides that web. I think because, like I said, extroverted feeling is the primary function there. I can see the impact of it a lot more. It provides that web of like social safety net or stress relief, and also provides the ability to open a space up in dialogue to understand yourself, other, and other, and the other as well, and your place within that. And also, I think they were interviewing people before they died, and what's the biggest life regrets you have? And that was, I wish I spent more time on relationships that I love, and also, just spend time with more relationships and less focus on your work and career or chasing money. So that was also people before they were going to die. So belongingness, love, affirmation, and trying to get away from loneliness, like phrases like going to where you grow, going to where you grow, or go to where people grow, or a goal where you're celebrated. These are type of quotes that are that fit into this. Um, so once we've established our physiological needs, safety needs, social needs, we can then go into the esteem needs. So this might seem a bit vain, but it's all about leveraging our talents, mastering them, putting them into a place where we're providing value for society. So positive self-evaluation. So you're at this stage you're able to see the talents you have, intrinsic talents you have, and the scale that we looked at, the dignity and the humility to maybe realize the talents that you maybe are not so strong in, but then achieving mastery and competence. So really, first having the humility to realize, okay, maybe what you're doing right now does not align with your natural skill sets, and then aligning yourself to your natural skill sets, and then really clocking in the hours to not just have the raw talent, but then actually the competency, so you can start to outclass yourself and maybe other people that have gone before, standing on the shoulder of giants. So starting to really building your competency there. Um, Again, your independence in your skill set, your reputation, your prestige. So really mastering yourself in that area. And then that's where we're really going into what Maslow called self-actualization. So self-fulfillment, growth, unity. What we mean by that is you're really creating systems in your life where you're really able to output the best of who you are, and yeah, you're having the stability in terms of your physiological needs being met, your safety needs being met, your social needs being met, your esteem needs being met, and you're now creating systems that provide absolute growth, unity, and unity in that you're recognizing what yourself, the talents you bring, is also part of the external world, and you can shape and mold that external world. And the external and internal world become kind of interchangeably moldable. Oops, time for a break. And yeah, just your morality comes there. You have a much more appreciation for beauty, because you start to go through life, I think, at a more slower pace, because you have a more deeper understanding about who you are and what you can bring to the table. And then you start of getting to this play aspect. So things not become so serious, work or achievement orientated, but you sort of play about, you get more exploratory about your own tastes, and you start to go to the cutting edge of what you're good at. And that's where you can really get that self-fulfillment. So from the savannah to getting to that cutting edge to your self-fulfillment, I hope that was some wisdom exchange. We had some people dipping in and out today, 1, 2 people. I hope they find that interesting. So yeah, I'm getting hungry now because it's morning here. So I'm going to go have my porridge, my breakfast. But I hope you enjoyed that. I think this will go live. So if you do want to have a discussion on this, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on Instagram at Jyoti Video Projects. I think this will upload onto YouTube. Hopefully the sound is okay for my first live. I hope to do these lives also a bit more. So tell me what you're interested in. You can leave a comment down below. Maybe you can catch the next one live. I'll try to do these in the morning time as well, so I'm bright up and early. Yeah, but hopefully that was a good overview. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot too. So yeah, I'm gonna eat my porridge now. And did I say my Instagram at Jyoti Video Projects? Yeah, follow me there, and hope to do some live one-to-ones at some point as well, because I want to learn. I'm a mentor. I want to learn some coaching skills as well, and actually apply these to people. Help you achieve your self-fulfillment and work through things as well. because I'm learning some professional coaching techniques. So if you're interested, reach out to me from there as well. So I'll say, have a good day, everyone. If you're from the UK, if you're not, if you're from Asia or wherever you are in the world, have a good rest of the week. It's only Tuesday, so I'll see you then, everyone. Bye bye.